having someone in that system who has that history, like you said, of maybe, hey, I'm used to my sense of kind of worth, or I'm used to my sense of well-being being partly attached to who I'm with, how many people I'm with, how attractive they are, right? The way that grants me status. And so if I've got that back history, I get put in this environment, it's almost an automatic, and not remembering that the habits that we form when we're young are the habits that we keep unless we're actively fighting against them. And so
I'm here with the Raabsmiths. For a lot of you, probably don't need an introduction because Joanna and Matthew have done a fantastic job of shining light in this space, bringing hope into this space, resources into this space. You guys are a household name in the sex addiction field. How cool is that? I'm trying to get my way there because I just like you guys. You know, I'm familiar with I've heard your story a couple different occasions, and just like mine, something about this space. I couldn't just be an addict who recovered and got out. It was like, man, this is messed up. Like, and the more I was standing here, I'm like, that's messed up, and that's messed up, and that's messed up. And then I keep looking, I'm like, this whole thing's messed up. And so I just couldn't knowingly walk away. And so started this podcast, and I'm happy to have you guys here because what we're going to be talking about today is more of, like most of my episodes, is how do we understand this thing so that we can recover? You know, I think there's so much of an emphasis on the crisis phase, and that's why I don't really talk about that much in my podcast. Is there's tons of podcasts out there. You guys have talked about that plenty, and your resources are fantastic for that. So it's like, I'm not trying to ever recreate the wheel. I'm trying to, like, how do we thrive in this thing? Individually, how do we thrive as a couple? So, and more importantly, because most of my listeners are executives, entrepreneurs, business owners of some kind, you know, I always kind of cater the conversation really to them because we are up against a really unique set of challenges. So let's dive right in. What we were talking about before we hit record was the successful culture that we have built, especially in America, and what how that kind of tees us up for failure. Matt, you were speaking to some critical pieces. I'm gonna actually have you lead off. I'll add on any that I forgot. But you know, as we're talking about compulsive sexuality, just cheating, infidelity in general, how does this happen, like, to couples who seemingly it shouldn't happen to? You know, wife's super attractive, husband's attractive. They live this really beautiful life. They live in a beautiful home. They have access to everything in the world. And all of a sudden, people are cheating on each other. What the heck's going on?
Yeah, and it happens way more than you realize. Like when we first got started, it was amazing how many couples were coming to us who were super successful, right? They were CEOs, they were running companies, they were doing all the things they wanted to do. They had everything in life that you would think like you need to have the great marriage, the great connection, and they were falling apart, right? They were just coming into our offices going like, I don't know if we have another day in us, let alone another year. And we'd start to talk about it, and you'd uncover all this infidelity, right? All these different behaviors. And the wife's looking at us going like, I don't think I can trust this guy. Like, I'm not sure that I'm ever going to step back into this space. And what's amazing is for someone to be that successful in kind of that business space, in that professional space, and then to struggle so mightily in the relational space. And I think part of the reality is there's just two different spaces. And I don't think we talk about that enough. Like, it is different going into a boardroom than in the bedroom, right? It's different walking through a relationship with a intimate romantic partner where there's vulnerability. There's a much different dance. And so many of us weren't trained for that. We weren't trained for that kind of relationship, that kind of connection. And so we lean into what we were trained. And most men were trained like, my sexual appetite is what I go after, right? What I'm going to go and get, I'm going to go have. And if I've got the resources, then I have access to more of that. And so that's the life I'm used to. And then I kind of step into this marriage relationship, this kind of more family-oriented relationship, and it's a totally different game.
Yeah. And I think as you desire more and more connection and intimacy in that close relationship, more and more vulnerability is required. And I think in general, in our culture, vulnerability is discouraged in men, right? Like from a very young age, it's kind of drilled into guys that it's not okay to have emotions. It's not okay to have feelings. And I think the more successful you are, the more responsibility you then have, the more risk of exposure in that vulnerability, right? That you can really be harmed. Even your family can maybe be harmed, right? And so I think that a lot of times they've learned to build a protective wall around themselves for multiple different reasons.
Mm-hmm. And Matt said something interesting, because I think it goes along. I had my last guest, she was talking about this too. She said, there's conversations that couples aren't having before they get married. And Matt just brought something up that is, I get why it doesn't come up, because it's kind of a weird thing to bring up. But, for the ladies dating and interested in successful men, which we know is a lot of, statistically, we know the number one attracting feature is income potential, right? And it's been, the last research I saw said that it was growing, that income potential is actually becoming even higher of a attractive trait. But again, for when you're getting with a guy like that, there are some things to ask that seem bizarre to ask, like, hey, does part of your successful journey involve stacking up women as trophies? Like, was that a part of your high school and college experience? And what do you think you're going to be able to turn that off now that we're married? I mean, that is a awkward question to ask your partner, because here you are, you're dating, you're 4 months in, to your knowledge, he hasn't cheated on you yet. And it's really hard to ask, hey, how was this behavior something that you did? Because it's very common for outgoing, charismatic males to chase women in high school and college. But again, it's one of those awkward things of like, how do I know this is going to stop? How do you know this is going to stop?
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's a tough question, because I know how the guy's going to answer. He's going to say, oh yeah, that was just college. But in the end, I think, come on, I run these groups. It didn't stop. It might have stopped for a couple of years, and then it came right back. But I think that's part of what we're talking about around the image of success being set, kind of to your point, Matt, being separate from a monogamous, committed relationship where we're preserving the sexual container. I mean, these are very, very, very different discussions. And I would say we live in a world that doesn't, I know we claim to value monogamy and preserving the sexual energy, but like I said, I don't see that. I see a world that uses sex for almost anything but the relationship. Are you guys seeing the same thing? And what impact have you seen on that with your clients?
Oh, absolutely. And and it's not to take the responsibility off of anybody, but it is to be real about the environments that we're building. When I talk to the guys who are talking about the conferences that they go to, the meetings that they're a part of, the ways that deals are getting done, right? It's almost always that sex, right? Alcohol, power, all influence, all of these things are getting melded into one, and they're being used as a part of the kind of financial to business system. Mm-hmm. And so having someone in that system who has that history, like you said, of maybe, hey, I'm used to my sense of kind of worth, or I'm used to my sense of well-being being partly attached to who I'm with, how many people I'm with, how attractive they are, right? The way that grants me status. And so if I've got that back history, I get put in this environment, it's almost an automatic, and not remembering that the habits that we form when we're young are the habits that we keep unless we're actively fighting against them. And so it's not a surprise that we get these cases, right? We're not, usually when we hear the story, we're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, it makes sense that you walked right into that trap, it caught you, and then you didn't get out, right? And you didn't get out until she found out, right? The wife is now devastated, right? She's crushed, because even if they didn't have the conversation, there still was that expectation, right? And there was that expectation that said, hey, wait a minute, I thought our life would be different, right? It would be separated from that world. And that's often how it's kind of shown, right? Like, hey, yeah, I know that's going on, but that's not what I do, right? I'm away from all of that when they're actually engaged in it.
And Joanna, I got to ask, like, I'm always shocked at how unaware the women are that this is going on in male culture. Like, I can't believe that they're so like, oh my gosh, men do that. I'm like, where have you been living? Like, I've known men have done that my whole life. Joanna, speak to that. How, like, is it something they don't want to believe? Is it something like how are women so blind to the influence of this in male culture today?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we all are exposed to the culture, right? But I think there's the real conversations are so siloed, right? I don't know too many guys who are going around talking to their girlfriends, sharing the details around what's actually going on, right? And so it's not just hidden kind of in a relationship, right? But it's also hidden in males in our culture, right? Like, I know my guy friends had conversations that were very different than ones they ever had with me in middle school and high school and college, right? And so going like not realizing, not being aware what you're not aware of, right? And so I think that's what so many partners in relationship, right? And all of a sudden they realize this little bit of information, when they get that little bit, right? That first discovery day, all of a sudden it all starts pouring out. They realize how much they didn't know, or sometimes they were just flat out lied to their whole life, right? Like, women are absolutely lied to when they're told things like pornography is not a big deal, right? Like, it's a habit I struggle with, but it's okay, it's under control, right? And it is amazing, right? Because especially in a relationship, I have two choices at that point, right? If my gut is telling me something feels off, I'm going to ask my spouse what's going on. And they lie. They flat out lie to my face, which is every single story I've ever heard, right?
Mine included. Yeah, I wish mine was. I wish mine was coming clean, but it wasn't.
I've yet to hear that story, right? There's always some piece of deception. I'm left either trusting my gut, which is so important for just my personal well-being, being able to trust myself and my intuition, but that means not trusting my spouse that I have put everything in to, right? Like, I have basically tied my whole life, my whole well-being to this person. I'm completely usually intimate and vulnerable with this person for many women, right? Like, they really are. They're showing up in the relationship that way, even though their spouse is not. And so the idea that in that moment, not trusting my spouse means I lose that secure attachment. Secure attachment is one of the absolute base needs we all have to thrive in life, right? And so many women go, well, I would rather keep that secure attachment than trust my gut. And so they believe the lie and they continue on. And so I think kind of just culturally, and then even specifically in the relationship, those are some of the factors that play out.
Well, and you bring up that was a perfect segue into my next point, which was, when we're talking about successful men, they typically are with women. They're with a certain kind of woman, and it varies to a degree. But typically, I would say together, there is often a shared drive for, hey, let's get the perfect life. Let's have the perfect family. Let's have the perfect vacations. Let's have the vacation house. Let's do life perfectly. I think that's common. I think amongst high achievers, it's not a dream. It's actually something that can be obtained. And so that kind of venture gets into this other aspect of both. I think the temptation there is there's a desire to look perfect. And I think that introduces a whole plethora of challenges. I think, I'm gonna speak to the male standpoint. I think, Joanna, you'd probably be best to speak to what it's like to be married and in that environment. I think for the men, there's a ton of pressure, and I think with the pressure comes entitlement. I think none of us men want to admit that. None of us want to admit that I feel entitled to doing whatever I want because I earn money. I think all of us are like, no, that's not me. I'll tell you this, in recovery, there is an aspect of, I built this, therefore, like you should be thankful, you should be impressed. And again, I'm not proud of that. I don't want that, but I think there is, to some degree, because I'm pouring so much of myself into it, there is this like, hey, appreciate me, acknowledge me thing. And that can go one of two ways. One, you do get appreciated and acknowledged for it by your spouse and again, I don't know if that validation is necessarily healthy. Or number two, your wife's like, so what? You made $100K this month. Like, you were gone. We were disconnected. We haven't had sex in like 3 weeks. Like, to her, it's like, so I don't care about that. So I think, but that whole challenge is, well, it's like, well, what do you mean you don't care about? I thought we were building the perfect life. What do you mean you don't care about that? Right. It's this interesting thing about successful culture of, hey, I thought we were building something perfect together and it's supposed to go this way. And I think that is another confounding element. I think it contributes to acting out and the progression of acting out. But then I also think it harms the recovery aspect, because I think when there's this whole we're perfect, we don't have problems thing, it really messes with the coupleship, because now it's, rather than just healing and adhering to sound psychological, and relational principles, you're trying to juggle something that has nothing to do with humanity, right? Perfection, standards, expectations, purity culture, ideals, right? I mean, I constantly saw my wife, it was like, oh my gosh, I put you here, and now all that's gone. It turns out that you weren't there. You're actually someone. So now she's freaking out. But I think it's a pretty big distraction, because rather than, again, focusing on what we should be focusing on, we're kind of caught up in how mad the world is at what we did, rather than what we are going to do as a couple. Matt, well, first, Joanna, speak to what it's like to be the woman in that we are perfect and striving for perfect environment, because it's a tough and distracting place to be.
Yes, absolutely. And I think so much of that, if you're in that place, there's a high level oftentimes of control that you feel in your life, right? And you have to hold on to that control to be able to continue living that perfect life. And so for partners, what is immediately stripped away from them when they discover what their spouse has been doing, when they discover the betrayal, it's any sense of control. They feel absolutely out of control. They feel absolutely powerless, which I think is part of why for them that feels so scary, because they don't know, what all does this mean I'm going to lose, right? And not only that, but what does that mean about the reality of this perfect life I thought we were living? So many of my partners say, like, we were the couple. We were the couple all of our other friends pointed to say, like, they have the perfect life, the perfect family, the perfect marriage. And now all of that is shattered, right? I bought into that narrative too. And now none of it feels true. And that's part of why that is so traumatic for those partners, right?
Yes.
The entire reality comes crashing down. Oftentimes in one, not even day, like one moment, right? When they discover, like, oh, things are not as they seem.
Yeah. Well said. And Matt, to you, like, how does this confound because I see it introduces another ball to juggle when you do not need another ball to juggle. I mean, the last thing a couple in betrayal needs is one more, but you have this image, what are our friends going to think? What do we, it's a bigger distraction than I think a lot of couples give credit for, because it's especially from the a guy's standpoint. Because I'll tell you this right now, and I don't know if I've ever shared this, so this is very vulnerable. I'm going to be completely honest. When this whole thing happened, my first reaction wasn't, oh crap, I'm going to lose my wife. My first reaction, I hate saying this out loud, I can't believe I'm doing this. My first reaction was, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to be the guy I wanted to be. I'm not going to be able to go to the after parties after the conference. I'm not going to be able to go to this thing with the mastermind group. I'm not going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to flirt, because that was part of the recipe, was like, oh, I need to be this like guy who women are just like lusting at. Like all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose everything that from a 14-year-old boy and all the way up from 14 to 34, 20 years, I've been trying to get the perfect six pack, the perfect outfit, and all of a sudden it's like, well, now she's going to pull all that from me. And now what all I have is my marriage with a woman who doesn't even like me anymore because I'm a cheat. It's like, that was the first thing that went into my mind, was like, man, I should just run. I should just run away.
Yeah. Well, and it's common. I've had a lot of guys in my office who've said the same thing, right? Like, wait a minute, hold on. Does this mean everything changes? And does this mean that, right, my life is totally different? And I get the joy of telling them, yeah, it actually does. You're like, it's not going to be the same. Sorry, buddy. It doesn't mean it's going to suck. And I think that's the key, right? Like, the life in recovery is a good life. It is a different life.
Better.
It's a good life. It's much better. Like, I look at my addict life and my recovery life, and there's not a choice. I mean, it's not a second that I think about that old life that I want it back. It is recognizing, though, like Joanna said, there's so much control involved in high achieving couples. And part of recovery is recognizing I'm actually going to have to give up control. Part of like the whole 12-step idea is that you think you have control over your life. Your life is so out of control. You're going to have to decide if you're going to give up control and really even just controlling the narrative. Now, a lot of times for couples, we found they're not public in this information. And that's not necessarily something we like recommend. Like, hey, let's go tell everybody. We didn't tell very many people when we were early on. But the control in the relationship will be a radical shift, right? There will be hard conversations about, hey, what does it look like to go to a conference now? I've worked with a lot of pilots, right? And they're like, what does it look like to travel? What does it look like to work for my company, to do what I do? But can I do that, like you said, without the flirting, without the partying, right? Without all of the things that led me to this path that destroyed my marriage and destroyed my life? Can I still have those same levels of success? And guess what? That is going to be part of our conversation, because if those things were a part of what destroyed our marriage, they're going to be a part of our conversation going forward. Even if it's my work life, it's still affecting my home life.
And Matt, it's funny. I've done so many of these episodes. You guys will be, I don't know, episode 50, I think. It's funny. I don't think anyone's spoke to what you're speaking to, Matt. And I'm happy that you're doing it. I speak to it on my solo episodes, but when I'm with therapists, it's not common that very rarely do therapists actually understand successful male culture or successful men, because they either haven't, been a massive part of that. Typically I would say therapists are healers. And so they may or may not be that familiar with that. But Matt, you're bringing something up that is so true. And Joanna, you touched on it too. So much of this have been interwoven. Like, it's like, oh, success now is partying, alcohol. It is, flirting. And I would say not just even flirting with the opposite sex, but, flirting with the same sex. of, oh, wow, that's a nice watch. Oh, hey, wow, I like your, it's this, so much of business has turned into, relationship. But more than that, it's turned into, how do we have these like exciting transactional relationships in condensed little ways? And it's, these little what do they call it in Fight Club? Single serving friends. It's that's really what it is, right? It's like we get involved where every single person is this like single serving thing with an objective at the end of it. And to your point, that's how healthy is that culture? And like, just kind of watch that and just make sure it's not, I fell way into it before I knew I was into it. I thought everyone else was crazy for thinking that it was crazy, because I'm like, there's nothing crazy about it. This is how success works. And I think that was when people started trying to rip this from me. I was very defensive, not because of the acting out behaviors. I actually had tried to stop those before I met my wife. I have evidence of me doing all sorts of things to try and stop those. Those I've never really wanted in my life. The problem was the other stuff, the selling out, the double life, triple life, quadruple life, putting on a show for people, saying what they want, suppressing my own needs, kind of constructing my entire life, buying things that I don't need. I mean, I was so into looking the way that they wanted me to look, that it really opened the door to, why be honest? Why have integrity, right? I mean, if I can succeed by being one of these 85 people that I get to choose to be that day, why would I be one person? And the challenge with that is, to your point, Matt, if you're not one person, how do you know who you are when you're that person? And because here's what I've realized: out of my 85 egos or parts, whatever you want to call them, out of my 85 egos that I have, 74 of them cheat on my wife. So that's why I would really ask all the guys listening is like, I get it. You're a shapeshifter and it is a skill. Absolutely. And I'm not asking you to stop that skill. What I want you to be really honest is of those people that you shapeshift into, how many of them are how many of them value monogamy, right? The truth is a lot of them don't. They want money, attention. They want to be the best guy in the room. And so at a certain point, maybe some guys will resonate this, but some guys won't. At a certain point, I liked how I was treated. I liked the the 74 Rollins that everybody treated. I liked how they looked at him. The problem was he's not monogamous. He cares about one thing and only: showing off and looking perfect. Right. And so I really appreciate you highlighting that, Matt, because that's a big deal. And I think it's not getting the attention that it deserves. Is how much, I've said this before, successful male culture is 3 steps back. So if your recovery is not at least 3 steps forward, so you can stay neutral, then you are becoming less sober every day. So ideally you would be taking 4 steps forward or 5 steps forward. But I think, again, to your point, Matt, I'm not trying to shift blame here, because ultimately we were the ones that chose to go along with the culture. But at the same time, let's not ignore something that we talk about in the sex addiction field, which is we are hardwired for connection. So if you think that you're going to not care about the culture and the majority, you are. It's why, I don't know if you guys know this, a lot of the porn industries went every view on a video, they assign 7 views so that the number is way higher than the real number, so that guys feel less guilty watching it, because they look at the counter and they say, oh, 157,000 guys have watched this in the last 6 days. I'm not weird. The irony is, you know what they're doing, right? And so, which leads me to kind of the point that I want to speak to, which is, as a couple standpoint, I love having a couple on the show because we get to talk about something that's why I love Jeff and Judy's show too, is like, it's such a fun thing that we really need to address, because we kind of are talking about 2 different issues here. Yes, we are talking about what guys have led to believe that has made these behaviors possible. But I think, the relationship's something entirely different now, like reconciling 2 worldviews. I don't think a lot of couples have really thought about that until now. And now it's like, wow, we have to find 2 worldviews that collide, and they're asking questions they used not to ask. And so now, sometimes betrayal recovery, it's like, it's not really about the sex. It's like, so hold on, you think that that's like the point of life? Like that's like not like now it's like, I don't want to be married to you for 2 reasons now. 1, you're a sex addict, and I don't like your outlook. But again, these are discussions. It just shocks me that these weren't coming up before they got married. But nonetheless, that is why I think I agree with what Matt said. Life in this is way better than before, because you and your wife should be having these conversations, whether you guys end up staying married or not. This is what relationships should be talking about. Like this is the stuff. We don't get distracted and just unsubscribe from everything real and opt into the world of capitalism, materialism. Like, there's realness here. So I would love to pivot into that direction, because I think you guys do a really great job of speaking to that. So I think that's the first thing is, how do we reconcile this? Now we have a woman who thinks all that guys who do what her husband did, it makes like guys who do that are just monsters, pigs. They have stay away from them. How do you stay in a marriage with a guy though, if guys who do this are that? I mean, you're supposed to stay married to a guy like that. I think it's something that women need to face head on. Joanna, can you speak to that? Because really what your husband's asking you to do is kind of soften your morals and soften your values, is what it feels like he's asking when he's asking for you to kind of change your mind on that. That's a big ask.
Yeah, absolutely. What's so interesting is you would assume that that's the view most women would take immediately. And they do about the behaviors, they do about the choices. But it is amazing to me how many partners come into my office going, but I've seen a different side of him. I know I've experienced something different, right? And usually we're pretty upfront about that too. Like you wouldn't have been married, you wouldn't have taken all the steps together that you have taken. There is something you've experienced in there, and that's something that you love. And if he could show up consistently in that way, I think that's what those partners want. And that's why they're willing to fight for it, right? If they had never experienced any of that, they'd be out the door so fast. And sometimes they are, right? I'm sure there are, but the ones who come into our office are going, wait, there has to be some shared values in there somewhere, right? And so a big part of the healing, the recovery process for the couple is rediscovering our shared values through this healing process. And so that's one of the journeys. It takes a while. It's not like day one. It's not even like year one sometimes. It's a long journey to get to that place. But at some point, there does need to be a reconciling of these, right? Those different worldviews, experiences, values, creating something unified together.
Because like Joanna and I, one of our shared values is like embodied experiences. We want to live life. We do not want to sit at home watching TV, doing the same thing over and over again. We have both shared and talked about how much a really unique, exciting life matters to us. And so our finances matter. The success in which we do our business matters because that feeds into that value. And so while we don't feel like we're attached to status or to something that just makes us look good, we know that shared experiences makes us happy. And so we both work hard. We educate ourselves, right? We train ourselves to be good at what we do so we can go afford the kind of lived experiences that we want. And so we'll talk to couples all the time, like, if you want to spend a year traveling around the world because that's the value that you have as a couple, that's the thing that matters to you, then you can get around that and you can talk about how do we build a life that builds that, right? And so many of these couples, they want to have a big impact. What I've really been amazed when we're working with a high achieving couple, one of their usually shared values is a deep impact on others. They want to do something significant. And so a lot of times we'll ask them, okay, is that thing that you want to do significant make $10 million? Or is it to affect 10 million people? Or is it, right? What's the thing? And it's amazing how many of these couples end up later on in their journey doing something significant, right? Either starting something or helping to create a movement. And that's where we talk about, like, you're going to have that better, that's the recovery experience, right? That's the going, ooh, I know what I was chasing before. And that was vanity, right? That was wind. That was nothing. Now what we're chasing, we're chasing together, and it's having some type of kind of legacy. It has an impact that gives back. And even if that impact is just the betterment of our relationship. And so I think Joanna's absolutely right. It's that sense of shared values. And then I think the other side is that, is there a willingness to change? Is there a willingness, kind of like you said, like to be able to separate some behaviors out and go, you know what, there's some things I do I've never wanted to really be a part of me. I don't necessarily say that this is the part I want to go forward. And if we can agree on that and boundary that, right? And just say like, hey, I like you, but the part that's out there, right? Having a girlfriend on the side, that part we both have to agree he's gone. Right? Like he can't stay married to us anymore, right? He can't stay a part of this relationship. If we agree on that, then it's really simple about like, okay, how do we keep him out, right? What keeps him from visiting? And that's going to be, as the guy, that's going to be my responsibility, right? It's not going to be my wife's. I'm not going to put that on hers. And what is incredible is, I mean, we've seen stories you can imagine in terms of level of infidelity and brokenness and things that you go, there is no way a couple comes back from that. And I have seen so many partners so forgiving, right? So willing to go, you get your second chance, right? You get the chance to make this right. But only when they can get to those shared values, I think. Only when they can get to that kind of core agreement.
And you know, Joanna hit something, because I think this is one of the, you know, it sounds so great when you say that, like, it's like, oh yeah, but the truth is, you can hold, these ladies are holding both, right? It's like, yeah, we have this, and like, this is why we're together. And then, but I mean, they, you know, the way that this works, you can hold two beliefs and they can be opposing. Now, rarely are they active at the same time. You might have a killer evening together and have this cool date night where that's not there. And then she becomes triggered, and as they're going to bed, it's back, right? So I think that's the thing that couples need to understand, you know, and that was something it's really tough for guys because they really want to see this up and to the right thing. And, right. You know, but your wife can hold, man, we have so many, like, gosh, I'm so glad we share this together. It's so fun that we could do that. I would love to see where this goes long-term. And she can hold the same exact value that says he likes women who are younger and more fit than me. Right. I'm, you know, I need to lose weight. I need, like, and so I think guys need to understand, like, can you imagine holding those two and how ugly that one is and how beautiful this one is? And she can hold them at the same time. Like I said, rarely at the same exact time, but I mean, you know, she could be 30 minutes from now, she could see something on Instagram of a woman who's very fit, and she could wonder, oh, I wonder if that's the type of women that he would act out with. Right. And so I think there's this, this battle that you're holding to one ugly reality and one beautiful reality simultaneously. And I think that's challenging, especially because, and I'd love to ask you, Joanna, on what does a guy do? You can't tell her to change her reality, because if you do, that is going to, like, come on, Matt. I don't know if you dipped your toe in that arena, but I dipped my toe there a few times, and that is a bad idea.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's not true. I mean, Joanna, they can't hold some of these ugly realities about the significance of why this happened and have a good marriage. You can't those do need to be modified. I don't think they need to be forgotten, and I don't think they need to be forgiven. I think you can go forward without forgiving and forgotten. I don't think you necessarily need to do those two things. So I don't think I'm forcing you ladies to do either of those. I'm not. But I would say the significance does need to get turned into a place that would allow a relationship to happen. Because I do think if the significance of him doing those things is he did it because you're ugly. He did it because he's bored with you. He did it because he likes younger women and not you anymore. He doesn't respect women. I mean, if that's the significance of why he did this, I don't know if you're going to be able to have a thriving relationship. Can you speak to that, Joanna? Because Matt and I, all we can do is be empathetic and be in our recovery. But outside of that, Matt and I can't tell you what to think about us. And I think if Matt and I try, your system says, well, of course you want me to change that, right?
Gonna go.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
I would say this is a Matt, like other couples who have decided to go the distance with this, and they're, rounding year 1.5, year 2. This does start to become the rate limiting step, which is I feel like we can't blossom because there's things that you think about guys like me, and it's really tough for us to flourish in the way that we need to. What are Matt and I supposed to do? Because it really feels like I felt really powerless in that situation.
Yeah, totally. So I'll kind of speak to the partner's experience first, and then what you should do. So basically what's going on for that betrayed spouse is we call it betrayal trauma. That spouse has been traumatized, and this is actually a trauma reaction her brain is trying to do to protect her from ever being hurt like that again. And so, so if you have a traumatic experience, your brain learns avoid anything that looks, smells, sounds remotely similar to that ever again. Otherwise, because you're going to be hurt. And so this is, you referred to, these trauma triggers, and it could be any random thing, It's usually that partner does not plan it, It comes out of usually the environment. Something triggers that pain, that trauma, and it actually sends her brain and her physical body experience right back to the first time she found out about the betrayal. And this is not something that they enjoy, Every partner I know would be like, oh my gosh, if I could get rid of this, I would just tell me what to do, And so the hard reality that both people need to know is that trauma takes time to heal.
Yeah.
This is not going to go away quickly. It's not going to go away overnight. Yes, there are things that can help it. Absolutely. And so I would say for that partner, getting plugged in with someone who understands betrayal trauma, understands the way the brain works and what that partner can do to be empowered over those almost automated reactions their body is having that include emotions, include thoughts, include, my actual physical reaction, And so learning to understand that is so important for that healing process. And as that trauma heals, exactly what you're saying, I'm not going to have a stronger reaction. I may still hold the memory. That memory may bring me grief, but that's much different than that wow, you disgust me, get away from me, And I mean, literally 2 minutes after we were just holding each other, cuddling, I was feeling so safe, And so it can happen that quickly. And it can be very chaotic and very confusing for both people in the relationship. And so just normalizing that understanding for that partner, understanding what they can do to start to heal is so important. And I think on the other side, what you can do is you can educate yourself on betrayal trauma. So you're not going there, what the heck's going on with my wife? I have no idea. And it's driving me crazy, All of a sudden you could go, oh, I understand. Her body's reacting exactly as it should be right now. And I know she's taking steps to heal that. We're okay. And all of a sudden, it's not about you, because what happens is the guy makes it about him, why aren't you trusting me yet? I'm doing all the things in recovery I'm supposed to do, I get defensive because I probably placed my value in recovery on how well my wife is doing or how good our relationship is doing, right?
Yep, up and to the right, up and to the right. Why are you sabotaging our relationship? Why don't you get over this? We're supposed to be going up and to the right.
And I've controlled my recovery so perfectly. I've done all the things, right? What for high achieving, I think, men, what can be really tricky is I take all that success over here and the identity I built up over here, and I go, well, now I'll just use recovery instead. I'll do recovery perfectly. I'm the perfect model of good recovery. Why is it my wife
Have
healing?
you worked with these people before? I can tell because they do. It's like next thing you know, it's like, dude, how are you in 18 intensives? Like this is insane, right?
I don't think you can get an 18-year chip before year 18. I don't think that's how it works. And one of the things we'll talk about, because this does happen for these couples especially, is I have to recognize on the kind of husband side, even if I've cut out the really extreme behaviors, if I have adjacent behaviors, and those can be really easy to miss. Like maybe it's when we have a big project at work or we have a merger that's coming up and I kind of start to ghost the family, right? I start to just show up less emotionally present or just less present in general. Even if I'm not acting out, that my wife, the signal that she's going to get is you started the car, you're in the driveway, you're on your way out. And so a lot of guys struggle to see like, hey, I put those boundaries in place like you told me to, but they don't recognize like, but yeah, it looks like you're leaning up against that boundary, right? And testing the fence like the velociraptors and in Jurassic Park, right? And that's going to terrify your partner, right? That's gonna trigger her. And so being able to recognize like, okay, how do we check in regularly? How do we talk about where we are? Because it's amazing what we found. Couples do so much better in recovery than they sometimes even talk about. A lot of times couples have made a lot of progress, but they haven't slowed down to talk about it. And not the kind of like get over it progress, but like, hey, we're in a different place, right? This isn't a year and a half ago. But if you can get them and slow down and talk about it rather than the kind of demands, right? The, hey, check me out, look how good I'm doing. And so I think that willingness to kind of look at that, be aware of that, and kind of go, hey, I get it. I'm doing some of the things I used to do that preceded some of my acting out behaviors, but I've made a call to a guy or I'm doing my work, right? I know exactly what I need to have in place to not go there. That's going to create a whole different environment in the relationship, right? Versus if she's the one having to go, hey, have you called somebody, right? Have you been to a meeting? Are you doing your work? That's when things tend to kind of unravel.
And Joanna, I appreciate you going back to basics, because I think one thing I do, especially in this podcast, and I'm saying this for listeners, guys, if you are newer to this and you rely heavily on my podcast and the experts that I bring in, you're probably missing a lot of the basics. This podcast was not necessarily designed for the basics in the crisis stage. I do like to speak to that because I don't think we should ignore it. But at the same time, if you're a listener listening to this, what Joanna said, go over and check. I'm going to have them tell you kind of all the different stuff that they have. But both Joanna and Matt have a robust offerings. A lot of them are free for you guys to be able to partake in equipping yourself for some of this. Because I think one thing Joanna said there is, even for guys in advance, so if you guys are listening to this and you're in advanced stage recovery, I think we should go back and reread some of those books, right? Reread, I just reread Michelle's Betrayal Bind again, because it's like, all right, I need to bring myself back in this, because it's like sometimes we forget about that, because my wife has had a recent set of triggers now in our advanced layer, because it's hard for her to hear me speak on this, because I'm constantly speaking on stage about this. I'm constantly speaking. And so she's hearing, she's reactivated in a different way because she sees me shamelessly speaking to a way that I did. And that messes with her body, because it's like, oh, she's kind of put off by, wow, he's speaking so detached from this, and this is so hurtful, right? So my point is, I think you brought up a good point, Joanna. Like we got to be careful getting too detached from what we did and what it's like for her, because part of this whole ecosystem is really understanding there are two things that are being held simultaneously: a deep, immense amount of love for each other, and then over here, I can't believe that guys in general would do this. Like, how gross is this stuff, right? And and the last thing I would say, and then I'll have you guys kind of fill in on because I know you guys got some cool stuff that you're cooking on. I want you to share that. The thing that I would say that you said I think was really great was we got to understand that there are, there's so many different states of reality that you two are going to be in. And Matt, you said this, we got to be careful not to judge that that's a slip or a backslide or I think educating about yourselves about all of this is up and to the right. I mean, that's just what it is. It's just, we're becoming better and better and better equipped. But I mean, the triggers are going to be there. I mean, my wife, we're in some great recovery, but my wife she still gets haunted by this. It's less about me now. It's more about, I hate that the world's this way. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of layers to this as you go. And in no way is that a backslide, but I do want to have you guys speak to, you guys have free resources. You guys have some pretty amazing paid resources. I'm pretty sure there's a book that is available or almost available. Speak to all of these things, and we can include the link in the show notes.
Yeah, the answer is yes. There is a book. It's called Building True Intimacy. It's really about taking what we learned working with so many couples in recovery from day one, really to kind of when they were graduated, we got to kick them out of the nest, and seeing what it took for those couples to go from absolute chaos to incredible relationships. I mean, we were talking marriages that truly everyone was jealous of because of how close they were. And the kind of things you're like, if you knew the backstory, you'd never believe it. And so we really wanted, because when we went through this, the kind of idea was like, who knows how couples get there, but good luck. And so we really have always been passionate about creating resources that help couples go from A to B really, really efficient.
Yeah.